I'll go ahead and then I will go ahead and share. So full screen. Let's get the full screen here. Platform. Okay, I am assuming everyone has seen my slides, my PowerPoint.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So again, we want to welcome everyone to Environmental Fridays. This is season 8, and today is episode 15. We have some really good stuff in store for you here today. If you would like to know more about Environmental Fridays, we have our URL here, www.theenvironmentalfridays.com. Down at the bottom right corner here is a QR code that you could get connected to our website. So this is our photo gallery of our speakers for this semester, this season. Yeah, has been some changes. And we try to keep you up to date on that. And today we'll be hearing from Heather Brake, not in her official uniformed capacity, but nevertheless, she is here with us. So we have a few more speakers coming up. After Heather, at least about 4 more speakers to close out our season 8. Um, Environmental Fridays has several sponsors. Among them is the American Chemical Society Committee on Minority Affairs. American Chemical Society is the single largest, single discipline um, scientific organization in the world. And so hopefully their partnership will help us increase our impact with Environmental Fridays. From the very start, even long before Environmental Fridays, I've been partnering with the Benton Spirit and Princella Tobias, who is publisher of the Benton Spirit. And we've done a lot of public science events long before Environmental Fridays. And then the other, somebody needs to mute. Somebody needs to mute. Okay. So, and lastly, my sister has a social emotional wellness organization called GC Scored, Every Piece Matters. She also is a partner with Environmental Fridays. If you would like, and we do encourage you to join our Facebook group, simply go to Google and type in Environmental Fridays Facebook group, and you will get the link. The link is shown here as well. Um, as well as if you'd like to view any of our episodes, past episodes, you can Google them. Google again Environmental Fridays YouTube playlist, and you will get all 8 seasons on YouTube. This link here, as well as the QR code, is for specifically for this season, season 8. Okay. So, a couple of announcements, observances for this month of April. In fact, most of the month of April is dedicated to some sort of environmental observance. We have Earth Month, National Garden Month, Poetic Month, and of course, Earth Day is coming up here next week. The 22nd is next week, Tuesday. Yeah, next week, Tuesday is Earth Day. All of these, to learn more about them, you can again go online, Google. A number of them are sponsored and at least promoted by the United Nations Environmental Program. So, why do I have Something is wrong with my, yeah. Anyway, um, sorry about that. I'm pretty sure I made this last evening, but I am using episode 14 instead of episode 15. So just hold on 1 minute. Let me get to that. Sorry about that. Okay, we are back up with episode 15, and there we go. Um, all right, so let's get to Nancy. Everybody see Nancy? Hello?
Hello, good morning.
Yes, is everybody seeing the screen here?
I just see us. Did you put your slides back up?
Okay, I need to put those slides back up. Sorry about that. Okay, let
It's
me
like,
put,
yeah, I see me.
okay. Okay. Let me put the slides back up. Sorry about that. Yeah, I had the wrong PowerPoint there. So let's get Nancy a proper. There we go. All right.
Yes, that looks
Yes.
good.
Okay. Very good. So as we were talking earlier before we actually started recording, Nancy and I have known each other for a short while, about 6 months or so. And even within that time, she's been a co-host already before, as well as she was a guest speaker in one of my classes here at Andrews, um, imparting wisdom and knowledge to my students while they prepared for giving their presentation. So Nancy is Cottington is an award-winning science communicator. She has a company called SciComm Solutions. It's a consulting firm dedicated to making STEM, which stands for science, technology, engineering, and math, accessible, fun, and engaging. She has had over 24 years in science communication, including 15 years producing science content for PBS, NPR. We probably have seen some of your stuff then, maybe.
Maybe yes.
She uses the power of storytelling to break down barriers in STEM and connect people to science in many meaningful ways. She's also the creator of STEM Socialite, a brand that blends fashion, creativity, and science. That's interesting. We need you to come and talk about that for a whole session. You
Well,
blend
I would love
STEM with
to.
fashion?
I'm sorry?
You blend in STEM with
Yes,
fashion? Oh,
absolutely. Yeah. My latest creation actually was I made launch pants for the Crew 10 launch out of in Florida at the Kennedy Space Center.
oh, you definitely need to come on and tell us all about that. Okay. So whether she's behind a mic or lighting up a runway, it says runway here. I'm not reading this
It's true.
correctly, right? Okay. Wearing with wearable tech, Nancy's mission is clear: make science unforgettable. So at this time, Nancy will go ahead and introduce our speaker for today.
Thank you so much, Desmond. And I am so glad to be back. So, thank you for having me and to co host this episode of Environmental Fridays, especially as we explore a topic that hits so close to home, our homes. And today we're going to look at how pets can act as household sentinels or canaries for PFAS contamination, which is also known as forever chemicals, and what that means for our health, their health, and yeah, what can we do about that? So I am very pleased to be introducing this morning Dr. Heather Brake. She is a veterinary public health officer with over 22 years of experience working for the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. She is a board certified in veterinary preventative medicine and has taught graduate level courses through the MSU College of Osteopathic Medicine, Department of Global Health Studies since 2020. She's currently pursuing a doctorate in comparative medicine at Michigan State University College of Veterinary Medicine, looking at dogs and cats as sentinels for PFAS exposure in the household. So the work she's doing right now is very timely, and because she sounds like you are very much uh, in the thick of your research and learning all about this, Dr. Brake. So very excited to introduce you this morning. Welcome.
Well, thank you. And thank you so much to both you, Nancy, and you and Desmond. And then just so happy to be here. And I know it's been a long time coming. I think it was last year that we got scheduled. So much, of course, has happened since then. So
Yes.
let me try to share my slides and see if we can get that going.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. Does everyone see that?
That's
Uh,
coming. So right now we're seeing your notes too. So let's do
You
full
see my
screen.
notes too. Okay.
Yeah,
Let's
you're in presenter view. And while you're doing that, I would just like to remind our audience, thank you so much for joining us this morning on this Friday morning. And I'm in upstate New York, so it is sunny and beautiful, which is very nice, a change from our fifth winter that we've been in. As you listen to Dr. Break and you have questions this morning, please type those into the chat and we will sprinkle them in and get to them as we are able to. But please utilize that chat. Tell us where you're tuning in from this morning as well. We'd love to know and see where everybody is from. And I see some familiar names in the chat. So thank you for everybody tuning in to listen and support this morning.
Okay. What are you seeing now?
Yes, full screen. No
All
note.
right.
Uh-huh.
All right, excellent.
Excellent.
Okay, so let me slide this down here. Okay. So when I talked with Dr. Murray earlier, we decided that if you had questions, that it's okay to interrupt me, but I won't be able to see you interrupting me. So just go ahead and just break in and ask me questions, and that will be fine. So as Dr. Murray and Nancy said, my name is Dr. Heather Brake. I am a veterinarian who has gone back to get my PhD from Michigan State University. So I'm very non-traditional and that I have been working full time at CDC and the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry. And I'm still living in Atlanta. So my entire degree has been done remotely. And originally they weren't sure how that was going to happen, but thanks to COVID, everything kind of went remote. And so I was able to not only take classes remotely, but also teach remotely in exchange for tuition. But I'm very grateful to be joining you today on Good Friday. And as was mentioned, my presentation today is entitled Pets as Household Sentinels for PFAS Contamination. And I also should mention here that not only do I have two human children, but I have two four-legged children as well. I have a golden retriever and a new mixed breed puppy. So our household has been really crazy as of late.
So could you show them to us if you have them around?
Yeah, I'll have to bring up pictures of them at the end, but our 4-month-old is they're both at daycare today. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to present at home with this much quiet.
Okay.
So if you have seen Oppenheimer, the movie, or maybe just know about the Manhattan Project, you will remember that we are talking about the making of the atomic bomb. So you might be thinking, like, where is this going, right? Well, a key component to the bomb was the fission of uranium-235 and plutonium-239 isotopes. So PFAS, the chemical that we're talking about, was discovered in the mid-1930s on accident, actually, and then right away was used by the U.S. government in the gaskets and valves holding uranium hexafluoride, and it was held in the uranium hexafluoride was in the pipes at the Manhattan Project's uranium plant in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. So PFAS was really critical to keeping that uranium hexafluoride in that pipes, and it was really claimed to be critical to the success of the atomic bomb. Well, PFAS not only coated the pipes and the gaskets, but it also coated the electric wires in the bomb. So you might be thinking, well, why? What gives PFAS their superpowers? And I know that some of you listened to a PFAS talk a couple weeks ago, and so this might be a repeat, but the term PFAS actually refers to a large group of per and polyfluoroalkyl alkyl substances with some very important things in common. So PFAS generally have a polar head group that's hydrophilic and a hydrophobic tail. And as a family, they have very strong carbon fluorine bonds. So I circled that here. Um, and these bonds are so strong that they're virtually indestructible. So the nature of the structure of PFAS is what gives this family highly desirable qualities such as thermal and environmental stability and the ability to repel oil, water, and stains. And that's what's really led them to have such widespread use in manufacturing and consumer products. So on the right there, you can see two examples of the most common legacy PFAS. On the top is perfluorooctanoic acid, or PFOA, and below is perfluorooctane sulfonic acid, or PFOS. So PFOA was used for Teflon, and PFOS was used for Scotchgard. Okay. So, what are generally PFAS used for? So, after World War II, the making of the atomic bomb, the use of PFAS was exploded. So, this was truly a miracle chemical back then. This was in the 1940s and 50s. People just thought this is such a great chemical. It's so thermostable, it repels oil and water. This is amazing. So in the 50s, a French scientist's wife actually said, "Hey, this chemical is so great. Let's try to coat some pans with it." And so her husband said, "Yeah, let's try it." And so then we had the birth of the Teflon pan. And so manufacturers were started using it in protective coatings not only for pans, but for fabrics and leather and carpets and you know it as the spray that we mentioned with Scotchgard, right? And it began to be used in Gore-Tex and firefighting foams and the coating of microwave popcorn bags and fast food containers and wrappers. And really now there's hardly a product around that doesn't have some sort of PFAS. So even hospital equipment and medicines and like I was mentioning when I was talking to my colleagues at Michigan State a few weeks ago, even the catheters that we insert in the arms to put in IVs have some sort of PFAS in them. So when I checked EPA's ComTox, which is their listing of chemicals dashboard recently, it listed over 12,000 species of PFAS. So it started with just a one, and there's so many different derivatives of this chemical because it's been used for so many different things. So one interesting fact that I shared when I was doing my qualifying exam is that you saw my picture in uniform, so I'm a member of the Public Health Service. Well, they use PFAS to coat our uniforms because it's a stain resistant, and uh, our current iteration of our uniform is on back order because it had too much PFAS on it. So even so it can be there's just too much, they had put too much spray on it, and so they had to reject those, and they're going to order a whole new batch of uniforms for us to buy. So that's pretty amazing. So I wanted to share with you just some basic uses of PFAS. So I'm throwing out a bunch of acronyms, but these are really probably the most common PFAS that you might encounter. Now, there's over 12,000 different types of PFAS, right? And some of these are more the legacy PFAS, like PFOS and PFOA that you might hear of, and you might hear of PFHXA or PFHXS. But these are some of the more common uses that we'll see in firefighting foams. You'll hear a lot of stories, particularly in Michigan, around military bases where PFAS from firefighting foams have contaminated the waterways, and that's generally has occurred from these legacy PFAS here for PFOA and PFOS. Also, you can see a lot of PFAS is used in fabric coatings, floor polishes, ski waxes, and other floor waxes. A lot of it in food packaging material. And so particularly in food packaging materials, PFAS loves emulsions like butter and Nutella and things like that. So it would tend to migrate into those type of foods. It's in cosmetics like mascara and lipstick, carpet coatings, leather products, and flea and tick products, which is what we're going to touch on just briefly later on in this presentation. So um, it's quite literally everywhere. So in my earlier slide, we learned that PFAS was virtually indestructible, right? And with so much PFAS being created and so much being used, you might think like, where is it going? Well, not surprisingly, it does float in the dust, it's carried by currents in the sea and can travel in the clouds and rain down on crops hundreds of miles away from where it was absorbed. And there really truly may not be any living thing, plant or animal or human, on Earth that hasn't encountered some type of PFAS. And so to give you an idea of that, I wanted to show you this map. And I know it's a little bit fuzzy, but this is a map from pfasfree.org, UK, and it's showing PFAS positive samples from wildlife collected around the world. And there's all of these different wildlife, amphibians, aquatic mammals, birds, fish. And so you see there's been more collections done in Europe and the US, and in parts of Asia, but from wildlife collected just in random places all over the world, they have found that they have PFAS, right? So even though PFAS is not manufactured in these areas or used in these areas, it is still being carried by the wind and carried by ocean currents, um, or dust or clouds, and it's going all around the world. So there really is no way that you can escape it having some exposure to this chemical. So I wanted, before we drill further into my particular study, I wanted to give you a sense of how much PFAS we are finding in the United States. And we first really realized that PFAS was an issue in probably about 1980 because of a lawsuit that was happening from the Washington Works plant in Parkersburg, Virginia. And if you haven't heard much about that, there is a movie called Dark Waters with Ruffalo in it, and it's a great movie that talks about PFAS contamination. And originally, the original I guess the flag that was originally brought up was because a farmer was had some dairy cattle that were dying, and that's because they were drinking some contaminated water from a creek that was coming out of um, the Parkersburg, Virginia plant. And the plant was coating pans with Teflon. Okay, so you can watch the movie. It's about 3 hours long, but it's a really good movie that talks about the whole lawsuit against DuPont and how the challenges of fighting a big industry about this PFAS issue. Well, after that, after this lawsuit, and finally it came to the conclusion that, yeah, PFAS actually did have some harm. And so in the year 2000, the government created some restrictions that no longer could we have those legacy PFAS, at PFO and PFAS, and others of those legacy PFAS because they had longer chains and were thought to be more bioaccumulative and stick around in the environment longer and so be more harmful. And that's why you see this big expansion in the family of PFAS. So we'll have like thousands of different PFAS now. But along with that is when the federal government decided, hey, we need to start looking to see how many of our people are really contaminated or how many of our water systems are contaminated with PFAS. And so in 2012, they decided to check the water systems. And so they did a test of the community water systems in the United States. And so there's about 51,000 community water systems in the United States, but they randomly sampled about 4,800, which you can see up here. And so that means there were many that were not sampled. You can see that. And when they sampled them, there was about out of 4,800, the majority, they did not see any PFAS at all in. But about 129, they detected that there were some PFAS, but it was below 70 parts per trillion. So it was in their accepted level. But there were about 65 community water systems, so what we would say city water systems, where they had enough PFAS that it was detected at or above 70 parts per trillion, which is what was considered the safe level. So these 65 community water systems were estimated to serve about 2% of our US population, or within the continuous United States, and being about 6 million people. And so when you think about it, that was 6 million people that they are pretty sure were exposed to high levels of PFAS. They did not sample all the community water systems, right? That was only a portion of the community water system. So we can have a pretty good idea that there's probably many, many more people who are being exposed than what we really know in the United States. So this is a map of those community water systems that were measured. And you can see there aren't any in Michigan that were measured as a part of that study. Now, I'm not sure why that was. I'm not sure if they were just randomly tested or if Michigan was doing their own testing at the site. But you can see that there are other sites that were chosen, a lot of them in California and Colorado, New Mexico, here is really interesting in northern Georgia and Alabama. And there's a lot of sites around here, but this is actually a huge region for carpet manufacturing. And so there is a lot of PFAS use because it was used to protect carpet with the Scotch Guard and stuff. So it's not surprising that there was a lot of water systems being tested here. And then, well, these are the water systems that were tested with at or above the 70 parts per trillion. So you can see where they're higher levels. Okay. So I want to drill down to Michigan because this is where my study was taking place or is taking place. And so these are the sites in Michigan where there has been positive PFAS samples. And so Michigan began testing for PFAS right around 2018. And this is because there was a person or a community outside of Rockford, Michigan, and a certain household that began to get sick. And they wondered if they were getting sick because of a landfill outside of um, the Wolverine shoe manufacturing plant. And that was located in Rockford, Michigan. And what had happened for years and years and years was that this plant or this company had a government contract to create or to build, to make um, combat boots for soldiers, and they would coat the boots with waterproofing so that the soldiers could use those in Vietnam and other places and not have to worry about their boots getting soaking wet, right? So what they would use is for the wastewater from that plant, they would just put into metal barrels and dump in the backwoods in the dump behind the factory. And that's just kind of what people used to do back then and what some people still do. And that, even when I lived, I'm from Holland, Michigan. So when I was growing up in the back of my aunt's house and my grandparents' house, we just had a dump and a lot of people still burn their garbage. But in there are pictures which I don't have with me here today, but there's pictures where you can see these barrels that had disintegrated away and their contents had drained down into the aquifers and contaminated the drinking water of the people who are living there. And the people had become sick and they began to ask, is this why we are becoming sick? And so the state tested the people and they were like, wow, you have very high levels of PFAS. And so that sparked a whole statewide testing. And when they began to test the entire state, they found that not only was the Rockford area very high, but all of these other areas had fair levels of PFAS. So some of the areas of Michigan are so bad that there are actually drinking water advisories and also advisories not to hunt and not to eat the fish. And so this is a sign that you see here that is actually from Alpena, Michigan. And this area was contaminated by Wordsmith Air Force Base that was there, and they had used PFAS. They had used firefighting foam that was made up of PFAS in a lot of their training exercises. And what these Air Force bases would do is they would train their soldiers, I guess, they're enlisted men, hot men and women to put out fires. And so then the training exercises, they would train them to use these firefighting foams, and then the firefighting foams would just contaminate the waterways. And so it's such a high level in and around Wordsmith Air Force Base that they have to now issue these advisories because the fish are not safe to eat. And then also the deer are drinking the water, and so there are hunting advisories that you cannot eat the deer in these townships because the marshes and the lakes are so contaminated. So how are PFAS and pets exposed? Well, drinking water is really one of the main ways that we know of that people are exposed, whether it is through private residential wells or municipal water systems. And so going back to the map of Michigan we just talked about, um, the people in Rockford who were exposed were all on wells, and so they were getting their exposure through contaminated aquifers. But down in Parchment, which is a small area of the Kalamazoo area, which is just probably about an hour south of Rockford, if you're thinking about West Michigan, they actually had a contaminated city water system, and that was because they had a old a parchment factory. It was called Vegetable Parchment Company, and they had used PFAS to coat paper, and it had seeped into the waterway, and the city water was using that water, and it was getting into their city water system. So as soon as the state found out about all of this contaminated water, they went to work and provided the citizens with water filters and also cleaned out the municipal system. So um, the citizens of both of these areas should be drinking clean water at this time. But people are also exposed by that PFAS is carried in air and dust. And so in studies that have been conducted between outdoor air and indoor air, actually, the indoor air and dust contains much more PFAS, as you can imagine, because of the coatings on the fabrics of the furniture and on the carpets and things like that being stirred up. And so that's one of the reasons we're particularly interested in household pets, because they lay on carpets and on couches, as you can see in this picture. But PFAS can also come to us through consumption of foods like meat, fish, and wildlife that were contaminated, through produce, because PFAS can be sucked up through leafy greens and other produce. It can come through consumer products like Teflon. It can come through makeup, medications, and also can spread through maternal transfer. So it can go through not only cord blood, but also through lactation. So, how is it absorbed into the body? So, as an aid to understanding how PFAS enters the body, I brought this graphic from nature.org. So, PFAS molecules, as I mentioned, could enter the bloodstream of people and animals through inhalation. It actually can come through dermal absorption, placental transfers, if this had been a female dog here, and absorption through the GI tract, which is really the primary way that PFAS comes in. So I want to stop right here because I think that I've fairly scared you all. So I want to tell you that even though PFAS is everywhere and it can be absorbed through leafy greens, it can be absorbed through um, our water and dust and inhalation, and everybody's been exposed. Very, very few of us will ever know that we had been exposed to PFAS. It's really those people who are living in highly contaminated areas who are going to ever know that they have been exposed, because it's really the dose makes the poison in this situation. You have to have a very high level of PFAS to have effects. Okay, so even though I've thoroughly scared you and saying that everyone has been exposed, it's very rare to have any signs or symptoms of PFAS exposure. Okay, so I'm going to go now into what PFAS does to those people who have high levels of exposure. Okay, but very few people will ever experience this. Okay. So in those people, very few people, and like I said, a few people in Rockford, a few people in those areas with the higher levels of contamination, we do see increased cholesterol levels. We see very small decreases in birth weight. And I say this is very small, that if you were a mother having a child, you probably would not really know it. It might be that your child might be a few ounces lighter than he or she would have been. We're seeing lower antibody response to vaccines, but not to the point of failure. We do see kidney and testicular cancers and some of the higher levels of contamination and exposure. And there's evidence of high blood pressure during pregnancy, changes in liver enzymes, and thyroid disease or dysfunction. And so this last one is particularly interesting because it is could be hyperthyroidism or hypothyroidism. It just really kind of depends on the person and some of their other things that they have going on. But we see very similar things in pets, right? So we'll see an increased liver weight and size. We'll see reproductive changes, particularly in rodents, where they'll have a smaller litter size, or maybe their pups don't survive. We have altered thyroid hormones, and some people are thinking that we might see hyperthyroidism in cats because of this, and also respiratory disease that we're seeing in cats. One thing that some of the studies had noted is that we are seeing potential obesity in dogs and cats because of PFAS exposure, and we're also seeing that in people. So there's a lot more to explore with PFAS in animals. So there's a lot of similarities between pets and people. The routes of exposure and absorption are the same, water, food, and dust. PFAS circulates with blood proteins. It actually likes albumin, and it travels to the liver and kidneys, and that's why we see an increased liver weight and size. It actually works, the mechanism of action of the pathology is that it causes the increase of fatty acid productions, and so you'll see fats being produced, and so you'll a lot more fat cells, and the increase in size of fat cells and the number of fat cells, and that's why you'll have an increase in cholesterol. And then some of the fats will be unable to be metabolized, or PFAS is unable to be metabolized, and then also it bioaccumulates. But there are some big differences between humans and pets, and which is why we think this study is important. There are different circulating proteins that the PFAS molecules attach to, which means that in some PFAS don't stay as long in animals as they do in humans, so our elimination rates are different. For example, for PFOA, it only stays for days in dogs compared to 2+ years in humans. So that's really important to know, because um, if a dog has PFOA, it means that it was exposed within just a few days, whereas a human is positive for PFOA, it means it could have been within the last few years. So knowing that an exposure happened within the last few days is a lot more helpful to eliminate that exposure or reduce the exposure. Also, the presence of PFAS in pets could, as I mentioned, indicate current recurrent exposures. And so that's why we think pets can serve as animal models for PFAS in humans. Here's just a graphic showing the half-lives of pets and humans and dogs. We largely don't know the half-lives of some of these other PFOA, or PFAS, but PFOA in humans looks like 1.5 to 5 years, where in dogs it's only 8 to 30 days. So again, this just helps us to know that there's a more recent exposure or a continuous exposure. Whereas in humans, if they were positive for PFOA, it could have happened anywhere in the last 5 years. And it's just a lot harder to target that. So we don't know if the exposure is continual or happened 5 years ago. So our hypothesis really is that because of indoor dogs and cats are largely living on the same flooring and furniture, breathing in the same air and drinking the same water as their human counterparts, we thought that we could explore whether or not pets could be on the front lines of detecting household contamination. And given what we knew about what the chemical did in the body and the compound, and that the compound was eliminated quicker in pets, our hypothesis was that routine blood work in pets could signal PFAS exposure in humans within a household. So they would be the canary in the coal mine, in that if you remember that the canaries were more sensitive to some of the toxic gases coming out of the mines. And if the canaries died or began to get sick, we knew that we had to get the miners out of the mine quickly because it would be hazardous conditions. So we had some specific aims for the study. We wanted to determine of the levels of PFAS living in known areas of contamination, and how we wanted to know how pet PFAS profiles compared to humans in the same area. Do pets have PFAS? Do they look similar to the people? And we wanted to know if exposure to PFAS caused changes in blood chemistry of pets, because we wanted to know if I brought my golden retriever Samson to the vet for blood work, would a veterinarian be able to pick up a PFAS contamination just on blood chemistry, and then let me know just through the routine blood chemistry, hey, you might have PFAS contamination in the household. So again, this is a map of Michigan with the contaminated sites in Michigan. And we chose those two sites we spoke about, Parchment, and which is in Kalamazoo, and the Rockford area as our two catchment areas, because not only were they two of the most contaminated areas of Michigan, but there were two other human studies going on at the same time. So we knew that we could get human data of PFAS in humans and compare that to the animals. So what we did is we had our veterinary nurses from Michigan State University go to the homes and collected household dust, pet food, and pet bowl water, as well as blood from dogs and cats. And we sent those samples to the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services to be tested for PFAS. And they're the same ones who tested the human samples for PFAS. We sent the blood to the Michigan State University College of Veterinary Medicine Veterinary Diagnostic Lab for the blood chemistry. We sent also blood to the Michigan State University Center for PFAS Research to be so we sent the dust to the Michigan State University Center for PFAS Research to be tested for PFAS levels of household dust. And then we sent the pet food and the water to British Columbia to SGS Access. And the reason why we chose SGS Access, because this is the same lab that CDC uses to test their water from their studies for PFAS. And these are the two statistical methods we use: a Pearson correlation to compare similarities in PFAS profiles between humans and household pets, and a multiple linear regression to determine PFAS-associated changes in blood chemistry. So let's see what we found. So the first aim was just to find out if PFAS was in pets living in our catchment area. And here you can see a broken line glass graph that definitely shows that PFAS was in pets. So these are our levels of PFAS that we found. We tested 40 different types of PFAS. I didn't include the PFAS, all the PFAS were on here, but mostly the ones where we did find PFAS. So this chart represents the animals in our pilot study, which are 28 animals, and the entire let's see, you'll see. Okay, so you'll notice that most of the concentrations were below 2 micrograms per liter of was a PFAS in the blood. But some values, both in pets and humans, were well above the 2 micrograms per liter. This is why we have a broken line graph here and a broken bar graph. And so most of them were very small concentrations, but we have some that are really high concentrations, even up to like 29, 30 micrograms per liter. So not every type of PFAS was found, but there are many positives. And the thing about this is that this is in dogs and cats, but there are no reference libraries. So there's no way for us to know what is normal in pets. The only thing that we have to go on is one study that was done in China, where they tested dogs with known exposure to firefighting foams and also some beagles that were in a research lab. And I will say that they tested 100 dogs. And when we compared what our dogs in West Michigan were to the ones in China, our dogs had much higher concentrations of PFAS than the China dogs. So that says a lot for the amount of contamination we have in West Michigan. Okay, so here in this graph, we are showing our pets in blue compared to the human data. These are the humans that were, their blood was collected by the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. And these were not the owners of the dogs, but these are people that lived in the same areas, the same communities as the dogs we tested. So in Rockford and in Parchment. And so what you can see is that most of the concentrations, again, both in humans and pets, were below the 2 micrograms per liter. But I also wanted to demonstrate that some values, both in pets and humans, were well above the 2 micrograms per liter. So the highest pet and human concentration for an individual species was PFHXS in dogs at 20 micrograms per liter, and PFO in humans at 65 micrograms per liter. So according to a National Health and Nutritional Examination survey, the NHANES survey, the national average for PFOA is 1.6 micrograms per liter, and that's what the green line is here. So this should have been the national average, and our numbers are much higher than that, okay? And then, and remember, PFOA is typically used in water, oil, and stain repellents, but we're phased out of production. So, and then in PFHXS is used to treat leather and fabrics, but it's also found in printer inks, and the national average of PFHXS is 1.2. So for this one, this is the national average here, and we're also well above that in West Michigan, both in dogs and humans. Okay, so 100% of pets, or nearly 100% of pets, and 100% or nearly 100% of humans had all of these legacy PFAS. So that means every single pet we tested and nearly every single pet of humans had some sort of PFAS in them. And a lot of them had PFAS, PFOA, PFNA. So you can see that everyone was exposed to at least some sort of PFAS. And so in this slide, though it is small, you're going to see this is a household dust sign. You will see the prevalence of different PFAS species we found in our pilot study presented a different way with the addition of dust, okay? So we tested 40 different species of PFAS. This graph is only representing the 12 species of PFAS that were found within 96% or greater across all the pets tested. So that's why there's only 12. So the blue represents the percentage of dogs that were positive for each of the isolates. Goldenrod represents percentage of humans who are positive, and the green represents household dust. And so I just want to call your attention to PFHPS and PFHXA, and those are here. And these are the two types of PFAS that are also found in the frontline top spot, which is a common flea and tick preventative. And so you see PFHXA wasn't found in humans, but a relatively high amount was found in household dust. And this is because it's also used as a component of floor wax, leather, and fabric treatment, food packaging materials, and so forth. So even though 100% of people and pets are positive, for many of the PFAS isolates, the concentrations in most types of PFAS were relatively small. And so I know that I've already exceeded my time limit. So so Dr. Murray, do you want me to keep going or do you want me to just,
How much more do you have?
not that many, a few more slides.
Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
Good. Okay. Okay. So next what we wanted to do is to figure out if the humans, how closely align the humans' PFAS profiles were to pets. So this is basically saying our pets and people really close, or our pets and our pets in the household desk closer, our humans in household desk closer. Just lets us know if kind of gives us a better sense of where the exposures are happening or how much exposure is happening. So what we found was that the closest correlation was actually pets and humans. So humans in household dust was 0.06, pets in household dust was 0.1, pets and humans 0.36. So the closer it gets to the whole number one is the closer the correlation. And what this is just basically saying is that we know that household dust definitely is a strong contributor to PFAS, both in pets and humans, but there is something else out there. It's not completely aligned with either pets or humans. Otherwise, we would see more of a one-to-one comparison of what is in dust is exactly what we're seeing in humans. But that's not true. A lot of times what we'd see in pets and in humans wasn't showing up in dust at all. So there's something else out there that's a source of PFAS in the household. It's not just dust. Okay, so the other thing, our last test we wanted to know is what about blood work? And are there any just routine blood chemistry results that change significantly that could help us determine any presence of PFAS? We had such a very small sample, but even with just the 28 animals we were able to test in a pilot study, we did see some significant changes in blood chemistry. And that was in creatinine kinase and total triiodothyronine, as well as total thyroxine and cholesterol. And so basically what we're seeing is thyroid hormones, um, creatinine kinase is actually an enzyme that we see from muscles, and then cholesterol. So those we saw significant changes in the presence of these types of PFAS. So I think with a larger study, we would actually be able to tease out maybe a pattern of changes in blood chemistry. So our plans to move forward are actually to conduct a formative research study, which we're doing right now, doing a knowledge, attitudes, and belief study among dog-owning public, because we found that even though the people who lived in the highly contaminated area, many of them just didn't know what PFAS were. And so we're going through and trying to figure out how many people actually know what PFAS is and how many people are doing anything to protect their households from contamination. And then also we wanted to expand the pilot study to about 330 dogs so that we can have a larger confidence in for our blood chemistry changes. And so in summary, you just would say that pets and humans have very similar PFAS profiles. We think that household dust is important, but not the whole picture of exposure. And that we do believe that finding consistent changes in blood chemistry may be possible. So that is bringing your pet into the veterinary clinic And having a routine blood chemistry test may actually be a way to tell if there's PFAS contamination in your household. And that pets could serve as animal models for PFAS exposures in humans. Right. I saw a lot of questions popping up, so I'm going to stop sharing.
Okay. So, before Nancy jumps in here, I just want to say that we have 16 persons online, and I am pretty sure everyone will agree with me that we are going to approve your doctoral degree.
Oh,
So, we don't care what MSU says. Well, we want you to get your degree, but we totally approve. I think everybody online would say that.
you just write to my graduate studies coordinator, Dr.
Exactly.
Murphy.
Done.
Exactly. Okay, Nancy.
Yeah, this was incredibly interesting. Thank you so much, Dr. Brake. And this is one of those studies where it's so incredibly fascinating and terrifying all at
Terrifying.
once.
Right.
So let's just talk about that for a second. As you continue to look at those sample sizes and you are looking in those concentrated areas, but we do know that this is a global issue.
Yeah.
How do you personally kind of back away from the gloom and doom? And then same thing for like our listeners, like what it's good information to have, but like what can they do with this
Yeah.
to be beneficial to their households and the animals and the people that are in there?
Yeah, it's perfect. Thank you so much for that great question. So I think that the reason why personally that I can be out of the doom and gloom is because I work at ATSDR and so I'm seeing the results, but not everyone has that benefit clearly. So there are very uh, simple ways to reduce your risk. For one thing is that many of the household products we buy now, if you look at the label, they say that they're PFAS free. So if you want to reduce your risk, makeup actually is starting to list if it's PFAS free. So I haven't actually checked that with myself, but mascara and lipsticks and things like that are where we're seeing in eyeliner. We're seeing the most PFAS. So just check and see if it's PFAS free. So that's one thing. Um, a lot of the household cleaners and waxes and stuff, you can see if it's PFAS free. So that's one easy way. Another way is surprisingly a simple way to remove your PFAS exposure is to use a carbon-based filter in your water. So people who are using filtered water, like sometimes you'll get those Brita water filters or even the ones that you put in your refrigerators. Those are very easy ways to reduce PFAS. Most of the community water systems or city water systems are now routinely checking for PFAS and they have filtration systems and stuff. So they are able to remove PFAS. But if you are living on a well and you are concerned about PFAS exposure, um, you can call your health department and have them check it, or there are a few labs who actually do test for PFAS. Yeah. So
So,
Oh, that's great. Thank
as a
you.
quick follow-up to that, as you get this data, are you then sharing that with the affected communities, the communities where it's above the
That's a great question.
level?
So we went into people's private households and what we did is we just had letters that we wrote to them with all of their results for their pets. And we gathered a lot of information about any health problems that their animals had. We had their veterinarian information. And so we were able to write back to the pet owners and let them know what their levels of dust were, what their PFAS levels were in their animals and things like that. So yeah, they all got personal letters back.
Good, good, good.
Mhm.
That's great. We did have an audience question from Princess asking, is it mandatory for animal clinics to test for PFAS during annual or other testing when they are at the vet? It sounds like you can ask for that though. And what kind of solutions for the PFAS can be like, how could you protect your pets? And I think you touched on that a little bit already.
Yeah, so actually there are no tests readily available for PFAS in pets right now, which is why we're trying to find out if we can use routine blood work. And it is very expensive to have people or pets tested unless there is a part of an ongoing research study from your health department right now. So generally what happens is that someone will get sick or there will be a known large study. Like, for example, Michigan was doing this Michigan PFAS environmental health study, MyPES, or the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry were doing a multi-site PFAS study. And so then they enrolled all these households of known areas of contamination. So that was one of the reasons I wanted to do this because there are very few labs and it's generally around 450 up to $600 to get your water tested if you're just a private citizen and you're curious. So I thought, for a fraction of that price and just getting your routine blood work done, we might be able to find that out sooner.
Mm, okay.
But if you wanted to protect your pet, I think that some ways is PFAS has been found in that oily top spot, that frontline top spot, and some of the other top spot oils. And I know a lot of veterinary clinics are moving away from that and doing more of an oral pill. That's what my dogs are on. So that might be just one simple way to just remove one obvious risk because you don't have that oil where it's being absorbed in anymore. You just have an oral flea and tick preventative. Also, you can look at your pet's shampoos and products and just see if they're PFAS free.
Oh, that's great
Princess
information. Thank
has
you.
another question. Did you do any of these studies in Benton Harbor and or Berrien counties, Southwest Michigan, Cass, Van Buren, Berrien?
No, our two catchment areas were only in Kalamazoo and Rockford, but if you go to the Michigan Department of Environmental Health and you can just Google PFAS and they have a huge website, all of PFAS, and it will show you all the human studies that they're doing and all of the water that they've tested, the surface water and well water that they've tested around the state.
Okay,
And so you can see what has been done in your area if you live in Michigan.
okay.
Mhm. They're Michigan is definitely on the forefront of PFAS testing. So proud of that from my state. Yes.
Right, exactly,
Mhm. So
That's
exactly.
double-edged, right?
I know it's like, that's there.
Yeah.
But we have definitely some major areas of PFAS because we use it a lot in manufacturing. Um, and we have the Air Force bases. So yeah.
When you
So,
mentioned, oh,
mhm,
sorry, Desmond, go ahead.
go ahead. I wanted to see if some of our listeners or audience knows if there is active PFAS, studies being done in their area. So, for example, Rosemary is in Georgia. Pat and Stacy are in Trinidad, the Caribbean. And there might be other people online from different areas. Do you guys know of PFAS testing in your areas? Anybody? Anybody?
Mm-mm.
No?
So there's one area, I don't know about the Caribbean, but there's a place outside of University of Georgia that's being tested. It's been in the news quite a bit for PFAS, as there was a yarn plant
Mm.
that was there, and they are concerned about PFAS.
Three,
So
the 3M company, which is one of the companies that's in Minnesota, correct? Or
yes.
okay.
And so actually they're they had a dome, which the Hubert Humphrey, I don't know, Metrodome, I guess, and their whole dome was covered in PFAS. It was like what,
Wow.
10 acres of dome. The
Wow.
fabric was all covered, I think, in Gore-Tex or something. And so, yeah, because 3M and 3M was a parent company of DuPont, I think, right? So, yeah, so
Yeah.
yeah,
And so my understanding, I went online, is that the what you call legacy
PFAS.
gas is supposedly not manufactured in the US anymore, but
That's correct.
it's going offshore,
Yeah.
still being manufactured, but not in the US. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's illegal to manufacture it in the US, but it's still, I think, being made in Brazil and I want to say somewhere in Asia and India, I think. But we have mostly gone to the smaller chain PFAS because it's less bioaccumulative and therefore less harmful. Although we still see problems with it. Yeah.
Okay.
That's kind of like the DDT, right? It's not, it's manufactured somewhere else and then it's brought in. So it's
Yeah.
still unfortunately here.
Yeah.
So if somebody wanted to know if they have an area around them that has PFAS chemicals similar to the ones that you mentioned in Michigan, like how would they find that information out? Like, is that something they can just Google or?
Yeah, I think you can just Google it. I would just Google it. You could go to probably your state health department, just Google PFAS. A lot of the states are testing for this, their environmental health departments. Also, ATSDR actually has a blood PFAS like it's a really cool interactive tool, and I wish I would have thought about it, Desmond. I would have prepared the link, but it's a really cool tool that just the general public could use to estimate the amount of exposure that they've had.
ATSDR?
Yes, and I think it's just, oh,
Hmm.
ATSR is the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry. It's actually currently married to the National Center of Environmental Health at CDC, although we are going to be moving to a different agency, a brand new agency sometime this summer. But yes, ATSDR. So if you just Googled ATSDR and PFAS blood tracker or something like that, there's we just up our web team just updated it, but it's you could just put in like where you live and your I think your age and some of the other questions, and it gives you an idea of the amount of exposure you might have had.
Yeah, we have a very good friend and colleague, Laurel
Yeah,
Berman.
Laura Berman.
Yeah,
Yeah. So she's great. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So we talk to her pretty often, so we
hmm
get that information from her as well.
Yeah, she's out in our regions and does a lot with brownfields. So yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, you have a lot of great great contacts from ATSR.
Hmm. Yeah,
I just popped that link in the chat.
yeah,
Yeah.
there are different parts of the world that um, really have not been testing for PFAS or even, totally cognizant of aware of the biological effects of it. And so the type of work that you're doing is seminal in that way because it could lead to other studies, other places around the world
Mm.
start really paying close attention to PFAS. It's global. I mean, there is no
Yeah.
doubt it's global.
Yeah, and what I'm hoping is that we're coming up with these findings of more and more places that have high levels of PFAS, right? Like
Mhm.
there were past manufacturing sites or past dumps or past, things that we just didn't know about that neighborhoods are being built on or that maybe their wells are tapping into these aquifers that are contaminated. So my thought is that maybe just by what's happening in our pets, we might be able to identify some places that are being, people that are at risk for contamination and exposure. So it just
I'm
just
also,
yeah.
it's kind of off topic, but I think I read a few years ago where pets could actually serve as, in your term, sentinels, detectors for other types of problems.
Yeah.
I think I read something about cancers, different
Yeah. Yeah, they could actually sense, well, they are actually being trained to smell different types of cancers.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
it's really
Um,
fascinating.
yeah. And then also, what was happening in Purdue a few years ago is that they were tracking different bacterial infections that some of the pets were having,
Mm,
and then being able to trace those and to see if the people are also getting infected by those. So we're
mhm.
exploring more and more ways, particularly as the veterinary clinics are all using online records and are getting connected nationwide now. So like Banfield hospitals or the PetSmart hospitals and the VCA hospitals, and there's all these hospital networks and they have online records. So now you can start to do these surveillance.
Really cool.
Yeah, so it's really good. It's pretty cool.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a lot of this work you need funding for, and
Yep.
that funnels through state, through the health department, as you were talking about. Um, but there very much is, I think, a conflict of interest where some of these big names don't want this information out, right? Because
Yeah.
it is in food products, and if you're getting your coffee in the morning, it's in the liner of that cup. Is that correct? Potentially.
Yeah, so it's not so much well, I say the liner of your coffee cup, yeah. It used to be a big problem in microwave popcorn bags and pizza boxes, right? So they've changed what they use in fast food containers now to go away from the longer chain PFAS. Now they're probably using shorter chain PFAS, but so it's less of a risk there. But you're right. So what I've been able to do, we actually put in two NIH grants. And so our current one is caught up in the funding freeze. But we've been able to just get smaller grants through the state of Michigan and through different creative ways. So we actually have one that's due on Wednesday through the Morris Animal Health Foundation. So we're trying to just come up with creative ways to get our samples. Yeah. So the name of the environmental movie I mentioned is Dark Waters,
Waters.
and the book is, I think, Exposure. I was gonna see if I had it on the shelf here, but I don't see it. Um, but Dark Waters is Mark Ruffalo, is it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Which is the Incredible Hulk from the Marvel.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I'm assuming too, and that could be something another guest speaker could try to address is the amount of research and maybe technology out there now for two things. One, creating substitutes for, safe, safe
Mhm.
substitutes for PFAS. And secondly, is to find more effective ways of detecting PFAS in households, that
Mhm.
are cheap, that are inexpensive. Actually, another one would be um, how do we then break down, how do we get rid of PFAS in our bodies? That is another area that could also blossom of research.
Yes, I went down that rabbit hole too, because you can chelate lead.
Mm-hmm,
But
mm-hmm.
right now there's no cure for PFAS exposure, right? So,
Right.
but because it binds to things like albumin, I thought maybe we could create a chemical similar to albumin that it could bind
And then
to to
it
pass
can,
out of the body. But my plate's a little full right now.
yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah, like I thought that would be a great thing. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah.
in other words, there's opportunities based
Yeah,
on this problem for research and for
for
and
sure.
jobs and stuff. So
Oh, yeah, it's
mm,
so much. Or like even a presence absence test or, just, yeah, there's so many different.
right.
Of course, as you do this, you know what, we don't have a baseline of PFAS across the country in dogs. So
Mm-hmm.
even just that, I thought about using Morris Animal Foundation just to create a baseline. Like what do we know for the normal levels across the United States or across the world, even in animals? I don't know. You know?
Mm-hmm.
So there's so many other questions that came up.
Yep.
Hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, good
And
questions.
Nancy?
I say absolutely. Like as you continue to dig, right, more and more
Yeah,
surface, there's, I think,
yeah,
huge opportunity, especially when you're thinking about something that could bind with it to help remove it from the body would
yeah,
be
perfect.
a huge win.
Yep. So I think we might be, at the end here. Nancy, you want to make any comments before? As we,
I just want to thank Dr. Heather Brake and thank you, Desmond, for hosting these Environmental Fridays. The topics really are so varied and amazing because it gives us that look at what's happening in our world, which can be a little bit overwhelming, but then also gives us really good tools on how can we make changes or adapt or use that knowledge to make the best choices we can moving forward. So, wishing you lots of luck, Dr. Brake, as you continue your very difficult work of finishing up your degree and balancing everything else in life, and be really interested to see the rest of your research as that comes available. But
Thank you.
thank you, everybody, this morning for joining us, and thank you for those great questions.
yes. So
Thank
in terms of the types of episodes and topics that we cover, just a sort of teaser for next week. We will be looking at a topic dealing with the environmental impact of homelessness in Chicago. Have you ever thought about that? The impact of homelessness on the environment? Yeah, that's just the teaser. More to come.
Tune in next week,
Tune in
9.
next week. That's right. That's right. So I want to thank Nancy as my co-host here today. Want to thank Heather. We want to thank our audience paying close attention and um, learning as well as contributing to our discussion today. Um, and if it's Friday, it is Environmental Fridays. It is personal. Hope everyone has a great weekend and see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye.